Some of us would say, too bad, so sad. Glad it ain't me. And that's the prevailing attitude in our society, in our culture. Is people see other people suffering. And they say, why don't they move? Don't lie to me. Don't sit here in the house of God and in your minds tell lies. But you know, when you see those people on TV that are hungry and they say send food for the hungry, you say, why don't they move to where there's food? Some of you think, why should I send him money? The cameraman looks like he's had a couple too many sandwiches. But there's this prevailing attitude in the culture that if people are suffering, they must deserve it. I see, especially around here where we live, where we're located, there's a huge homeless population. In fact, Ashley was saying the other day that it's one of the top 3 problems in Fresno. She said education, crime, and homelessness. I would put unemployment up there, especially at 2 double digits, 14, 15, 16% now. But Ashley says homelessness is something that we got to deal with. Well, we see it around here. How many of us see a homeless person and say, oh, he chose to be there? How many of us look at a homeless person and say, oh, the decisions that he made in life got him where he's at? And we sit there and we look at them, not realizing that all of us are one paycheck away from knocking on mama and daddy's door, homeless. Knocking on our brothers and sisters' door, homeless. And we better pray when we knock on their door, they don't say, oh, well, it was the decisions that you made. Mira, now you're homeless. See, I told you to marry that jerk. I told you, go to San Joaquin Valley College, the guy didn't get his GED, that you would not have these problems. I told you he's not good. I told you that woman was going to ruin you. I told you that woman was going to ruin you. I told you so. Nehemiah didn't sit there and say, well, why didn't they leave when we left? Why did they stay back? Nehemiah didn't sit there and say, oh, well, I'm blessed. Nehemiah didn't say, I'll pray for you. The Bible says that he wept, that he mourned, that he fasted, and he prayed. Why? Because he wasn't like the people of today. They could care less when somebody is suffering. He wept and he cried because he was wounded in his soul and in his heart by the plight of his people. I look at us and I know there's some of you in this room that would take the shirt off your back for your loved one. And I know you do whatever you can to help others. Sometimes some of you to your own detriment. But it starts with the right heart, the right attitude before God. Nehemiah could have just shined them on. He could have just said, you know what, that's bad news from home. No, in his spirit he was broken. He is so overwhelmed by the news and the suffering back home that he spends days fasting and praying, looking for some kind of direction. When was the last time you received some news that brought you to tears about somebody you know? On Thursday, when I got home, my neighbor's son-in-law was outside doing his yard. And we've lived there 7 years, and I have a good relationship with him and his wife and I. We wave at each other. You know, we give pleasantries back and forth. And they're Armenian Presbyterian. And I found out I've been seeing a lot of cars there. And when you start seeing a lot of cars at a house that hasn't had any cars in 7 years, you start to say something's going on. Something's happening. So I've called him a couple of times. He hasn't called me back. So I always look over. We have that relationship like the guy in Home Improvement. We look over the fence and talk back and forth. And it's funny because he has a little rock to stand on, and I stand on the trampoline, so I'm higher than him. How's it going, little man? The son-in-law told me, you haven't heard that he was married, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She had less than 2 months to live. And I was like, whoa. Whoa. What do you do with that kind of news? Your neighbor. And all of a sudden, all the stuff I went through with Dad over the last 3 years, over 3 years ago, just came back to me. Everything, I know they're going next door to everything we've done. And when I told Annie was like, we gotta do something. What can we do? I go, well, they're very closed off. It's not like we can go sit next to her. So Annie went over there with some brownies. And you might say, you know what, but what's happening, what's brownies gonna do for them? Well, it's gonna help with all the people that are coming over to have something to put on the table. But they have her bed in the sala. This is a very private woman, very, very noble, very, very quiet, very ashamed. But she can't make it up the stairs anymore. And they have her bed in the sala right there by the front door. And And Annie didn't want to go in there, but I said, just, you didn't know this, we're praying for you, and we're going to do whatever we can to help you at a time like this. It broke my heart to know that they're going through something I just went through. When was the last time you got news that affected you? And it might have not been your uncle, it might have not been your brother, your sister, but it was somebody you knew, and you were like, man, something heavy happened. Nehemiah began to cry. Now, we don't know if he had family back in Israel. We don't know if his whole family, if he was a noble, that means all the nobles were brought. So he probably doesn't have any close relatives back there, but he has a lot of relatives back there. They're probably not close because all the nobles would have been brought, and that's probably where he is, one of the educated, one of the noble. But his heart is broken because of his people, because of what's happening there. And I looked at this, he is so overwhelmed, and he fasts and he prays. When was the last time that I fasted and prayed and cried because somebody was going through something? I'm saddened for my neighbor and his family. I'm saddened about the news, but also about what they're about to go through because I've been there. Nehemiah didn't say, I'm glad my family's out of there. No, he wept. If you're told that your family members or somebody you know is suffering, what do? How do you respond? If you have a relative that's living in ruins right now, that maybe doesn't even have enough food to eat, are you willing to feel their pain and do something for them? If your brother or sister loses their job, can you make their house payment for 1 month? Nehemiah is severely affected by the news that his homeland and his people are suffering. We cannot be heartless to the plight of our people, especially people related to us. I grew up in a home where my mom would always go to yard sales and buy clothes. And sometimes I would wear the latest corduroys to school and wondered why it wasn't popular. We grew up poor. We put patches on our jeans. My mom would have to iron on patches on our jeans so we could keep wearing them. Now it's like cool. I saw a guy yesterday on a bike, man, he had patches everywhere, and I was like, man, he looks really good. They were cool patches. Like, our patches weren't cool. We hoped they were the right color. But I used to wear brown corduroys with a blue jean patch underneath it. And we used to play canicas. So where did we get the holes in our jeans? On our knees. From playing marbles. My mom would always collect clothes to take back to her siblings that were living in Mexico. So when we would go to Mexico from Washington, my dad had a canopy. Remember, we used to ride in the back of the truck because that's what Hispanics do. He would put these tablas across the bed of the canopy, and then they would put all those clothes down, and that would be like the mattress. You hoped you didn't get the jean button from the corduroys. And then we would put the colchas over that, and we would make it all the way back, and Mom would take clothes. One year, I remember my dad took two water pumps, like the sump pump that we have down there in the basement. And the 2 sump pumps went to my aunt's house and my grandparents' house so that they didn't have to use the rope and the bucket to get the water out of the well anymore. And I was happy because the year before, that thing, the hose broke out. Guess who got lowered 50 feet into the dark well to get the hose? The guy. I wonder why we're afraid of the dark. I was traumatized as a 10-year-old. If I told Michael right now, I'm going to put you in this hammock, I'm going to tie a rope and lower you 50 feet into the well, Michael would run. Nice knowing you, Dad. Gotta go. My dad would take stuff to his family in Mexico. My dad's 5, 6 siblings, all of them. Dad found a farmer in Washington that would sponsor their families for 5 years to work to come to Washington. They all got their papers through Dad. My mom and dad would send money to their family in Mexico. All of my mom's family got their papers through Mom and Dad and through farmers that would sponsor them because that's the way it worked. If somebody didn't sponsor you for 2 to 3 years, you couldn't come. But once you were here for 2 or 3 years, they were basically saying, if that person goes on unemployment, we're going to pay it. If that person goes on welfare, we're going to pay it. That's how it used to be in the 70s. And I looked at this and my parents taught me to care about family. My cuñada is here. My cuñada, she's my wife's best friend in the world. They're twins. You can't tell because one's like 5'8" and the other one's 5'2". One's blonde and the other one's brunette. But they both get on my nerves sometimes. So I can take her. 2 years ago when my cuñada's moving from Washington, my wife says, you're going to go help her move. I live in California. She lives in Washington. I don't know. It's kind of far. 15-hour drive. But that's the way we were brought up. You helped family. I could have easily said, who told you to marry that gringo? I could have easily, no, I couldn't have. Why? Because I had to sleep with my wife.